buckwheat with butter and salt. He remembers how in the small kitchen, veiled in winter steam, an old aluminum pot emits a barely audible crackle. The buckwheat is finishing its cooking, absorbing the boiling water as if each grain were a small treasure chest for storing warmth. There is always something stubbornly autumnal about this matte, chestnut-colored groat. The scent of dry herbs, of fallen leaves, a faint, nutty waft that rushes out the moment you lift the lid. Butter, sliced with a knife with a polished wooden handle, melts slowly, leaving golden islands on the surface, and when a spoon passes through this whisper of grains, you can hear an almost imperceptible sound. The buckwheat quietly flowing, like sand in a child's hourglass. In the 1970s, this wasn't just a porridge. It was a doorknob leading from a world of scarcity to a world of predictability. No matter the empty shelves and endless queues all around, buckwheat was like a savings account for daily sustenance. It wasn't loved for its luxury. It was respected for its character. It was made into go-to lunches in dorms and late dinners after a work shift. It was taken on trains and to dachas because people knew it would not let them down. And a strange story circulated in one courtyard about an old warehouse manager who, during all the years of the Great Shortage, hid several sacks of buckwheat not for profit, but to bring half a kilo out every morning to a quiet courtyard bench where pensioners gathered, so that no one would have to be ashamed of an empty pot. No one ever saw him. They said he appeared before dawn, like a ghost of the attic stairs. But for many in those buildings, the smell of buckwheat is associated precisely with this invisible act of kindness. In these bowls, where the grains shimmer with a modest gleam, lies a lesson from that era. Strength is not found in rarity, but in the quiet reassurance of a habit that will outlast any regime and any winter. And so every spoonful of this simple porridge sounds like a promise. The home will stand. Navy-style pasta, macaroni po-flotsky. The pan takes on the onion with a gentle sizzle, and the air in the kitchen immediately turns sweetly peppery, almost theatrical, as if a curtain is rising before a premiere. The pasta, boiled to a confident firmness, mixes like white feathers with the browned ground meat, and this whole string orchestra begins to play as the cook turns a wooden spatula, the crunch of the crust, the rustle of the onion, the short base of a knife tapping against the edge of the pan. In the 1970s, Navy-style pasta wasn't just a quirky name, but a promise of soldierly efficiency, quick, hearty, and made from whatever was on hand. This dish was born from military logic, one cauldron for all, one seasoning for many plates, and, strangely, it took root in communal apartments and new cooperative kitchens, where the light from an Ilyach's lamp was just enough to illuminate the table and the spice shelf. But according to urban legend, this simple dish has its own hidden story. In one courtyard lived a former cook from the Northern Fleet, who always salted his pasta by the stars, guided not by a measuring cup, but by the constellations visible from his window. The Big Dipper, a pinch, Cassiopeia, another pinch. His neighbors laughed until one summer the salt disappeared from the entire district due to a supply disruption, and he, without batting an eye, cooked for the whole courtyard using a single can of anchovies, rinsed of their oil, saying that the sea itself would measure out the salt. Since then, in those apartment buildings, they believe that Navy-style pasta is a dish not just about meat and pasta, but about the memory of those who know how to feed others without unnecessary words. This smoky, oniony, and restrainedly meaty aroma still brings many back to that moment when hunger retreated in the face of simple resourcefulness. And so every bite is not about poverty, but about the discipline of the heart. Improvise, but be precise. Herring under a fur coat. Selyodka, pod, shoe boy. On the holiday table, where the tablecloth is always slightly starched like New Year's snow, this purple monolith looks like a geological rock extracted from the seabed. Layers of carrot, potato, egg, and beet, compacted by homemade mayonnaise, form a small universe with a salty heart, the herring. The spoon sinks in gently with a heavy sigh. The aroma of the beet cuts through the sharp edges of the fish, and each serving is like a cross-section of time. Perhaps a celebration in a panel 9-story building, or a parent's anniversary where the toasts are louder than the radio. In the 70s, shuba was more than a salad. It was a marker of solemnity, a right to beauty with a limited palate. They said that one cook from a factory canteen laid the layers so precisely, it was as if she were laying parquet flooring in the house of culture, and workers would come from neighboring workshops just to get 3 portions to go, to bring some happiness home. A strange story is also connected to her, as if she once mixed up the jars and added to the mayonnaise not mustard, but a spoonful of secret apple cider vinegar, which was acquired through connections from the health inspection office. The salad took on a new note, as if someone had opened a window in a long, stuffy room. From then on, in their district, they believed that a proper shuba should tickle the nose with a subtle apple tang and serve as a reminder. Even in the densest layer, one can find transparency. Herring, under a fur coat, is always an attempt to dress a harsh reality in bright fabric, and that is precisely why it is so firmly tied to a child's belief in miracles. When the plate is empty, the feeling remains that the celebration is still going on. It has simply moved to the kitchen and is whispering from the refrigerator. The lesson is simple. Aesthetics are not a luxury, but a way to strengthen the walls of the home from within. Doctor's sausage on a loaf. A pale pink circle of sausage is laid on bread like a wax seal on a letter that must be read. A glossy surface, barely firm to the bite, a light, milky sweetness behind which a subtle, smoky shadow hides. In the 1970s, Doktorskaya sausage was not just a product, but proof of good fortune. It was acquired through cues, connections, and sometimes strange exchanges. 2 cans of peas for half a kilo of sliced sausage. Every courtyard had its own supply lines, and at times it seemed the sausage moved through the city like a silent train, stopping at the right apartment entrances for exactly 5 minutes. They said that at one local deli the curtains would rustle at night. It was the merchandise manager, unable to bear the poverty of the shelves, who had learned to listen to the refrigerators. If the motor hummed steadily, there was sausage. If it stuttered, it meant the supply had been diverted somewhere else. He would go out onto the empty street, press his ear to the wall and say, "It'll be here soon." And sure enough, by morning, neat logs of sausage would appear in the display case. Perhaps it was all fiction, but the feeling of the hunt gave the taste a special note of victory. The first bite always sounded like a drumbeat. "We got it!" And there was an almost ironic secret, too. Many housewives saved Doktorskaya for guests and official occasions, but on weekdays, they would slice it paper-thin and dry it in the oven, creating homemade chips, a crispy, salty echo of luxury. This sausage taught an entire generation that joy is not an ingredient, but a circumstance, that a loaf of bread, butter, and a thin pink circle could come together on a gloomy day and become a small celebration. The taste of Doktorskaya is not so much about the meat as it is about the memory of the supply routes, of the whisper, "A shipment's in," of the scent of the deli, which always smelled faintly of cold and wet paper. And so every sandwich is like a postcard from a country that can no longer be found on a map. Sprats in oil. A tin can opens with a quiet rasp, like the doors of an old club where a record is still playing. Inside are rows of golden bronze fish, packed so tightly it seems as if they were whispering all the way to your home. The oil gleams with amber, smelling of light smoke and distant shores. And when a fork carefully lifts the first sprat, it breaks so precisely and softly that you can hear the barely perceptible crunch of its tail. In the 70s, sprats were a kind of pass to a festive mood. A small can was capable of substituting the feeling of scarcity with an illusion of plenty. In one building, they told of a neighbor upstairs who kept a whole fleet of cans in his sideboard for the sudden arrival of old friends. And once, when the power went out for the entire block, he decided to host a black dinner. Candles, black bread, pickles, and sprats. They say that night someone recorded the sound of the rain, the clatter of dishes, and the whisper of toasts on a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and later listened to that recording during difficult weeks as proof that warmth can be made not from light, but from a shared rustle. Another semi-legend is tied to Sprats, one of Baltic diplomacy. It was said that an employee in a supply department knew how to trade for important small items not with money, but with cans of Sprats, and for this bartering he was nicknamed the Captain. Maybe it was true, but the most important thing is the taste. Smoke, salt, softness, a slightly bitter note from the skin. It all comes together on a slice of Borodinsky bread, and you are no longer in a cramped kitchen, but on a pier of light where any news seems less frightening. Sprats taught not only how to make a proper snack, but also how to approach a celebration as if solving a problem. With a little skill and a spoonful of patience, even a small can becomes an event. Beef stew, top grade. A can, placed in a pot of water, hums like the engines of distant trains. The metal heats up, then surrenders, and the lid gives way to a knife. An inner universe comes to light. Dense fibers of meat, aspic that trembles with every movement, the warm aroma of bay leaf and black pepper. Tushonka, canned stewed meat, in the 1970s was not just a product. It was a concept of reserves, a philosophy of preparedness. It was trusted on trips to the south and on fishing excursions by student construction brigades and during sudden, all-encompassing moves. It was opened in fields and in communal apartments, thinned with water, added to pearl barley and buckwheat, and each time the result was something surprisingly reassuring, a taste that filled the spoon and erased the boundaries between seasons. A story was told of a night watchman at one warehouse, a former frontline soldier who believed that every can had a destiny. This one, for the road for the young. This one, for a winter illness. This one, for a misfortune that's better left not to happen. He would mark the bottoms of the cans with chalk, and when people came with requests for written-off goods, he would miraculously choose the very can that would be needed just in time. Nonsense. Maybe, but one family later swore that it was his tushonka that saved them one winter when they got stuck on the highway. They opened it right in the car, got warm, and survived. In the taste of tushonka, there is always an echo of a campfire, even without a fire. The fat spreads across the plate like little lakes. The meat releases its juices, and the world becomes a little sturdier. This product taught one to plan not with numbers, but with feelings. You are always a little calmer when you know you have a top-grade can for a black day. And let gourmands laugh at tushonka. In the country's history, it will remain a reliable bridge over an unpredictable river. Briquette jelly, a briquette of bright raspberry powder wrapped in rustling paper, is in itself like sweet contraband from a child's dream. Water comes to a boil and speaks in raised tones in the kitchen. She pours the powder in a thin stream, and a magical chemistry begins. Steam, a growing thickness, a glow on the sides of the pot, and now the liquid slowly grows heavy, becoming viscous, like thyme on a Sunday evening. The smell, berries, sugar, a bit of starchy pollen that tickles the nostrils and transports you to a school cafeteria where aluminum mugs leave a rim of sweet warmth on your lips. In the 70s, kissel from a briquette was like the click of a switch, a way to quickly turn on a feeling of care in the house, like a bedside lamp. It does, however, have a little secret, passed along in whispers. It was said that in one city the cooks at a sanatorium learned to tune the kissel according to the hospital calendars. A little more tartness on days of melancholy, a little more sugar for holidays, and the patients said their moods genuinely changed. Of course, it sounds silly, but in that area, many housewives started adding a pinch of citric acid for clear dreams, assuring that it helped children get through the long winters more easily. The texture of kissel is a song in itself. The spoon moves slowly, like a boat on a syrupy river. Craters are left on the surface, which immediately close up, and there is something therapeutic in this. The world breaks and then mends itself again. Kissel teaches that a dessert from nothing is not about poverty, but about the will to create warmth. It is like a fairy tale that parents tell in a tired voice because they believe that right now someone needs this fairy tale. Kvass from yellow barrels. Summer in a Soviet courtyard always began with this color, a warm, sunflower yellow army of barrels on wheels. The hose hangs down, the lid sighs, and the vendor, like a conductor with her baton, pours the tart, bready coolness into thick-walled glasses. Kvass hisses with the laughter of bubbles and with the light tobacco note of sun-heated asphalt. It smells of rye crust, the damp plywood of the counter, and the small hands of children reaching up high. A full one, please. In the 70s, this was not just a drink. It was a city liturgy, a communal rite in which everyone took part. Construction workers, school children, grandmothers with their string bags, and ice cream vendors in white caps. They said that in one district, the barrel's driver knew how to tune the taste according to the weather. On stormy days, the kvass tasted drier and stricter. In the heat, it was softer and fuller, as if he were adjusting the drink to the mood of the street. And a half-amusing legend circulated, that one day the kvass in the barrel grew sad. It had become flat, and the vendor whispered Yesenin's poetry over the hatch at night, and by morning it was sparkling as it should. Childish nonsense? Perhaps. But everyone who drank kvass from the communal mug remembers not only the taste, but the feeling of belonging. You return the glass, hear the clink of it, and it's as if you've become party to a pact, to live together, to share the coolness, to stick together as a courtyard. Kvass is the gastronomic proof that you can love a city by the mouthful, and that thirst is quenched not by sugar, but by a sense of community. Uzvar dried fruit compote. In old enamel pots, where a thin white crack always remained along the rim, Uzvar would come to a boil like a cautious fairy tale. Pear seeds would tap against the sides, wrinkled apples would float and sink like letters that had been read and tucked back into their envelopes, and the steam would carry the scent of oven drying, of warm attic dust, and of an August garden that had survived until February in a 3-liter glass jar. The color was a deep amber with honeyed highlights. In the light, it seemed almost red, like the thin blood of a tree. In the shadows, it was a thick, almost syrupy gold. And when you brought a mug to your lips, the cast-iron table would ring softly, as if in support of the sip. In the 1970s, Uzvar was not just a drink. It was a technology for extending summer, the alchemy of an era of scarcity. While apples were being cut into slices, strung on threads, and hung to dry under the roof, women would tell each other recipes they never wrote down, because a true Uzvar knows itself. In one home, they whispered that during the war, the owner's grandmother had saved a string of dried pears in the attic. That winter, when the sugar disappeared, she boiled Uzvar with a spoonful of red currant jam, so as not to forget the taste of joy, and it was as if the drink remembered this habit forever. Whenever trouble came to the house, the hidden dried fruits were brought out from under the table and boiled for a long, patient time, until the walls began to smell of hope. Uzvar has its own special soundtrack, the gentle splash as you add the dried fruit, the hiss of the approaching boil, the wooden spoon scooping from the very bottom, and all of this comes together into the rhythm of a safe home. It teaches that warmth can be preserved, that memory has the taste of smoke and sun, and that from the small things, a handful of dried apples, a few black plums, 2 cloves, a whole story is made where every sip says, "We will wait out the winter together." Okroshka on kvass. When the city heat was so intense that the asphalt grew soft and the stairwells smelled of damp concrete, Okroshka sounded like a whisper of salvation. Cucumbers, chopped with a steady confidence, tapped against the wooden board. Dill unfurled its green fan. Eggs crumbled into white and yellow specks, and all of it was plunged into cold bread kvass that sparkled in the light with tiny needles of bubbles. The taste, like a walk through a kitchen garden at dusk. The tartness of the kvass soberly meets the sweetness of the cucumber. The potato adds a softness. The greens sing a clear high note, and the spoon chimes against the sides of the bowl as if to check whether this is all a dream. In the 70s, Okroshka was culinary democracy. Everyone could assemble their own bowl like a collage from the available parts, and in this way, it offered a rescue from monotony. Daily life was gray, but Okroshka granted the right to a small choice. In one courtyard, they told of a groundskeeper, a former riverboat cook, who claimed that proper Okroshka had to be consecrated by shadow, placed on the windowsill so that the evening light would pass through the pitcher. Then, he said, it would acquire depth, like a river where the motor has fallen silent. Foolishness? Perhaps. But in that building, the Okroshka truly did become different by evening. The flavors settled, the sharp lines softened, and everyone who came in from the street, tired and salty with the day's dust, received a bowl of equilibrium. Okroshka teaches that coolness is not the absence of fire, but a carefully assembled world where everything is in its place, and that sometimes the best solutions are kept in a white enamel pitcher that reflects the inverted city, and as you lean over, you smile at it like an old friend. Pea soup with smoked bones. In a thick-bottomed pot, the peas slowly turn into a fog. The yellow halves fall apart, thicken, and settle at the bottom in soft hills, while tiny islands of fat left by a smoked bone rise to the surface. They shimmer like mica and gather into a star map that can be read with a spoon. The smell, smoke with a light caramel, the sweetness of onion, the warm floriness of the peas. The kitchen turns a light yellow. Even the lamp seems warmer than usual. In the 70s, pea soup was a hymn to the economy of precise gestures. Nothing goes to waste. Flavor is drawn from the bones. The broth becomes a home for everyone who has come in from the street, where there is bitter cold or, conversely, an unwelcome thaw. And a strange story was told. A watchman at the butcher shop, gray-haired and silent, would press the smoked bones to his cheek before giving them to his people, listening to them like a violinist listens to the wood, and would say, "This one will play well in the soup." People would laugh, but later admit that the soup with his bones always turned out right, deep, as if a distant chord from a campfire at a children's camp were sounding within it. This soup isn't about luxury. It's about the confidence that a warm spoonful can move the day forward. The first mouthful is viscous, the second, lighter, the third, and you already feel a calm spreading down your back. Pea soup reminds us that richness is the ability to draw music from the simplest material, to let time do its work, and then even a modest dinner turns into a whole symphony that you want to listen to down to the last crumb of black bread. Sauerkraut soup. Shchi is the light steam from under the lid and a delicate tang that with its first breath tickles the bridge of your nose, and with its second embraces you like an old shawl smelling of mothballs and dried mint. In the pot, the cabbage remains resilient, never fully surrendering. It is like a character. It bends, but does not break. The broth is clear with golden beads of fat, The carrot lends its sweetness, the pepper crackles finely between the teeth, and somewhere deep below, a bay leaf floats, beautiful and meaningless, like the memory of letters that never arrived. In the 70s, Shchi was a form of resistance against urban forgetfulness. It transported people from their panel buildings to izbas, traditional log houses, to stoves, to slow simmering, and to unhurried conversation. In one district, they spoke of a cabbage vendor at the market who chose her heads of cabbage by their knock. She would rap a head with her knuckle and listen to how its heart sounded. This one will sing in Shchi. This one is for pies. The customers would laugh, then come back and ask for another one just like it. Shchi is a food where sour and warm don't argue, but become friends. A spoon passes through the sour and sweet veil, and from it draws the strength needed to endure the short light of a winter's day. It teaches that roots are not a metaphor, but a method. When everything around you is changing, you return to cabbage, salt, water, and patience, and the world comes back together, like a neatly folded wardrobe with a strip of gauze on the shelf. Siberian pelmeni, homemade and store-bought pelmeni, are the mathematics of fingers. Circles of dough, a teaspoon of filling, a pinch, 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 and a crescent is ready like a little moon that can be dropped into boiling water and pulled out 5 minutes later, already clinking against a white ceramic bowl. Steam rises in a column, butter sizzles, sour cream settles like a cold cloud on the hot surface. Vinegar chimes with a thin acidity. And in this bowl, there is always more than just food. It is a communal effort, the grinding of meat in the kitchen on a Sunday, conversations about how everyone is doing, the laughter of children at war with flour. In the 70s, pelmeni lived a double life, a homemade celebration and a duty dinner from the store, when the paper packet was stuck together, and inside lay the silvery frost of a factory freezer. And on our stairwell landing there was a legend, that a quiet neighbor, who worked as a foreman at a factory, knew how to make lucky pelmeni. A crumb of bay leaf was always tucked into one of them, and whoever got it would have a year without any major breakdowns. No one ever saw this leaf, but for some reason everyone ate more carefully, as if listening to their bowl with their ears. Pelmeni teach a reverence for the gesture. Don't rush. Shape them carefully. Measure the boiling water by its sound. Let the butter sing. And then the world, even a small one, will fall into place, where the heat will muffle anxiety, and the cold, sour cream will add clarity of thought. And yes, sometimes the store-bought ones are a miracle too. From the packet to the pan, and suddenly Sunday is catching up with you on a Wednesday, and you smile, breathing out steam. Cutlets with a bread top. In the frying pan, they are born from a crackle and of patience. Ground meat, mixed with soaked white bread, onion, pepper, and salt, transforms into a pliable mass that is laid in hot oil and immediately says, "I am here," its crust smoothing out like a jacket after a long journey. The smell, caramelized onion, black pepper, the fat that promises satiety. Inside, a moist crumb, firm but soft to the bite. And when you break a patty with a fork, you hear a quiet sigh. The steam rises like a vacation cloud. In the 70s, the meat patty, kotleta, was an art object of economy, to stretch the ground meat so that no one would notice, while preserving the flavor, juiciness, and the hostess's self-respect. In one apartment building, they told of a literature teacher who claimed that the main spice is a pause. Let the ground meat rest. Let the bread remember its childhood. And her meat patties truly were special, as if all the words left unsaid during the day had time to ripen within them. There is also a semi-secret story about a neighbor, a locksmith, who would add a drop of tea, the strong brew from his morning mug, insisting that it made the flavor deeper and darker. They laughed, of course, but later asked him to do it again. These meat patties teach culinary diplomacy, that a compromise between what one would like and what one has can be noble, that a greed for meat is not the only path to satisfaction, and that the crust, which has memorized the pattern of the frying pan, is also a signature of the era, recognizable from the first bite. Fried potatoes with onions. If a country's cuisine has a sound, it is the rustle of the frying pan as thinly sliced onion meets potatoes cut into fine strips. The oil shoots tiny sparks, the golden slivers stick to one another, then release, and with every turn, a theater of aromas is released. The sweetness of onion, the earthy softness of potato, a light smokiness if the pan is cast iron and knows many stories. In the 70s, fried potatoes were both a student's dinner and a quiet celebration for an engineer after his shift. Quick, hearty, and without cues. But in our building, there was a little secret. On the 5th floor lived a musician who insisted that proper potatoes love a waltz. They must be turned unhurriedly in 3 or 4 movements with pauses, as if between musical bars. His potatoes truly did smell different. The crust was thin and even like the lacquer on a violin, while the soft center rang with warmth. Sometimes he would add a pinch of sugar, caramelizing the onion a bit more, and then the potatoes became almost festive, even though there was nothing else on the table besides a salted pickle and a piece of black bread. This food teaches the modest luxury of labor, to make a world from 3 ingredients, a stage from a small frying pan. It reminds us that the golden color is not about wealth, but about the precision of the moment when it's time to turn off the heat and call everyone to the table.